It's a new year, 2012, and what better way to look at the year, past and present, than through the eyes of State of Play. Joining us this week are Steve Martelli of Wilmington City Council and House Minority Leader Greg Lavelle. Thanks for being here, guys. Let's start with some predictions. Either of you want to kind of jump on what you think the biggest issue in Delaware will be this year?
I think it's got to be the budget. I mean, again, particularly this time of year, it's going to be both the city and the state. I mean, Greg can probably speak more to the state, but I know in the city we're facing some significant challenges, and we're going to have to find a way to balance this budget with decreased spending, which has been a bit of a struggle for a lot of folks, and without raising taxes, which is going to be a very difficult thing. I know WEFAC's numbers came back and they weren't real promising. The next 5-year projection, and included in that projection was a significant property tax increase, which I know I can't support, and a lot of folks on council can't support. So we have to look at alternative ways to balance this budget, and I think it's going to be a major challenge.
Yeah, I would agree. I mean, it all starts and ends at the wallet, particularly when times are tough. Yeah. And last year for state spending, actually went up fairly significantly, about 6.5% on the operating budget. And if you throw in some other stuff, I would make the argument that spending was up about 8%. Well, we're not seeing that this year. The economic forecast numbers are down. We'll see the governor's budget sometime this month, actually in the next couple of weeks. So, we'll see what happens there. But when you talk about the city, what I seem to hear from the city is, the guy who's going to run for mayor and win will be the guy who can get the most money out of Dover. Yeah. Well, Dover doesn't have money to get out of. Yeah. So, that'll be the challenge. It's an election year, which will make it even more fun and interesting for all those spending initiatives. And with the dynamic of a new mayor's race and things like that, it'll be an interesting year in Wilmington.
Does the election in the city, the mayor's office being open, play a role in the way the budget process goes? I mean, it was really ugly last year.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I think who the players are, who's in there will certainly have an impact on things. The problem is that, when you have an election year and you have some folks who have already announced, you have Dennis Williams and you have Bob Marshall, both folks from the state level, and then you have some folks in the city level, Kevin Kelly and Bill Montgomery, who in order to get their initiatives to appeal to certain voters are going to have to spend money. So, it's like we're trying to control the budget, and they're going to have an impact on the budget, or conceivably have an impact on the budget, both on the state and city level, because they want to show themselves in a great light and have an opportunity to say, hey, look what I'm doing for you folks, and in order to get these programs going, it costs money to do so. And so it's going to be difficult. I mean, it's certainly going to play a role in the budgetary process for sure.
And the good news for the voters of the city of Wilmington, at least they'll have a choice for mayor in November. Yeah. Mike Brown, City Councilman Mike Brown, is going to run, or is running for mayor. He's announced he's running. Right. So he'll have the benefit of the scrum that will be the Democrat primary and the various council people that come out of that, and so Mike will benefit politically from that. Yeah. He'll also offer his own ideas, his own initiatives, and so it'll be a great old-fashioned election in Wilmington.
Sure, absolutely.
And there's probably more people going to jump into the race.
Oh, I think
in the coming months.
I think Scott Spencer just announced it, didn't he?
Scott Spencer and 3 parties to be named later.
Yeah, right. Yeah, I think it's going to be. It's going to to be.
I did look at you while I was asking that question.
I noticed that.
I noticed he ignored it.
Oh, yeah, he didn't answer it at all.
Greg.
Right.
I left him alone. It was my New Year's resolution to be nice to my cousin.
But so it'll be interesting to see the way it plays out. Do you think it gets as ugly between the mayor and council as it did last year when he presented his budget last year? It was sort of a war declaration.
Yeah, was fighting words, weren't they?
They were fighting words.
Literally, yeah.
I don't know. I think in order for Bill Montgomery to have an opportunity to win the election, he's really got to attempt to temper the mayor's comments, because I got to imagine that anything that the mayor says or does from this point forward is going to be a reflection upon Bill. Whether he wants that to be the case and whether that's fair or not isn't the issue. It's just the reality of it. And as a result, I think Bill's got to try and do what he can to temper the mayor, and I think everyone knows that's a very difficult task to undertake. The reality is we've got tough times ahead of us. From a council member's perspective, I'm not real happy with the idea that we have this $6.1 million that came up and we're automatically looking for ways to spend it right away. I think that's something that we should put away and save in addition to our rainy day fund, but something else. How that plays into the budgets or the mayor's budget address, I don't know, but I think it's going to be a rather contentious, continue to be a rather contentious process, because I don't know how much. I think relationships have cooled a little bit. I think the conflicts have cooled a little bit, but they're still there, and it always, you know, to Greg's point, once the money talk starts, it's when the tempers tend to flare.
Well, and you know, you go back a few years, Steve, and you probably remember this when the headquarters tax was put in, and there was another. This was 3, 4, maybe 5 years ago. A number of new taxes were levied to recognize some of the tax-exempt status of some buildings and other things in Delaware, the Delaware Corporation stuff. Each county where someone was headquartered, every time there's a filing, they get 10 or $5 or whatever it happens to be. And what came out of that was a huge surplus. That was like, hey, look at the great job we did. Well, the great job we did was actually to get money, you know, out of Dover. And there's that the memory exists down there that, well, you know, how about a little acknowledgement of where it came from? And it wasn't your own genius. It was the fact that we've taxed again these you know, corporations, these faceless corporations, which aren't faceless. They're mom and pop businesses, in addition to the out-of-state companies and things like that. So whether or not you can recreate that magic in Dover, I'm not too sure.
All right, let's shift gears. Either you surprised that the Bluewater Wind deal fell apart and is kind of out there now, not happening?
Blowing in the wind.
There you go.
Am I surprised I voted for it? There was a lot of public sentiment for it, I guess 4 or 5 years ago when it passed. But I guess I'm not surprised, and really hopefully there's a lesson that comes out of that. And it's a fundamental question: is should the government be picking winners and losers when you come in with these economic development initiatives? Should they come with customers, let alone money? And you know, it had its day, it had its moment, and it didn't work. A lot of technologies fail. Beta failed, VHS succeeded. You know, there's plenty of examples, and so I think personally it's something we should learn from. And perhaps it's better left to the market to decide those prices. If you look at natural gas and other sort of more market-driven sources of fuel, they've come down dramatically. So it's not a surprise to me that it's failed, and you know, the Washington and all that. And it was ironic that I think it was ironic that some of the blame for the failure was on the legislature. Well, what did we do? I mean, you know, they crafted an agreement, you know, quite frankly, under the threat of death. Which probably not a great way to craft an agreement.
Right. There was a lot of arm twisting for.
Well, a lot of arm twisting, but I mean, it did not fail because of the Delaware General Assembly. Period. You know, it failed in spite of the Delaware General Assembly.
I'm disappointed. I mean, I genuinely was hoping for an alternative energy source. You know, I really was hoping that it would succeed. I don't agree with Greg in that I think that the government should have some role in economic development, a significant role in economic development, and put some stuff out there. I think we certainly need to encourage businesses to come into the state or the city, and if that has to be at some level public dollars, I'm okay with that. If you gain in one area, I think it's good. Am I surprised? I mean, I think it's almost in Delmarva's best interest if it doesn't succeed, isn't it? I mean, you can't control. I mean, you can't get a 59% tax increase. I mean, a rate hike.
Yeah, but if you go back to that, and that was the big spike in prices. But the reason that big spike existed is because the General Assembly in Delmarva agreed to freeze rates for 7 years. So if you freeze rates for 7 years to get deregulation, when that freeze comes off, it's going to go up to the market. So that again demonstrates that, you know, there's consequences, simply put, of government interference, if you will, or participation in a lot of these things. I mean, you freeze anything for 7 years, they were able to price it out in the futures market, and then when it came off, rates spiked and happened to coincide with a time in the markets when energy prices were going up. So I understand what you're saying, and it's not an easy call, but you can't look at that and say that would happen again. That would only happen again if you froze rates.
I don't think it would happen again. I think that that with alternative energy, you would certainly decrease the.
Well, but you have, you know, why not let Delmarva do that anyway? They're engaging on land wind sources. I mean, the offshore industry, particularly in the United States, doesn't exist. Yeah, but and every municipality, you know, every state, whether it's New Jersey, which has an initiative, Massachusetts, which has an initiative, Maryland, which has an initiative, every state says, gee, we're going to get the manufacturing out of this if we do this. Well, every state ain't going to get the manufacturing out of it. Quite frankly, the Chinese will probably get the manufacturing
out of it.
I
think we missed
over here to put it together.
Because to that point, I think we missed a big opportunity to manufacture these products here. But also, I mean, Deep Delmarva Power, they don't get. I mean, wind power is zero rate. I mean, whether it's 1990 or 2013 or 2020, the rate's going to be the same. I mean, there's going to be fluctuation because of labor costs and those sorts of things, but it's not going to be just an arbitrary increase, whether it be because there was a moratorium for 7 years or not. But I mean, a 59% rate increase is ridiculous.
Yeah,
and having wind there is having wind energy or some alternate form of energy is going to significantly decrease that sort of impact upon the consumer.
Is there a sort of a lesson to be learned from this sort of falling apart to Bloom Energy moving to Newark and the state helping that happen as a sort of alternative
We'll
energy
see.
source?
I would actually, that's a good point on Bloom. We'll see. I would, segue over to Fisker as something that's more Solyndra-like and actually having problems. I mean, they've had some recalls.
Right.
There's some private money going into it, but you have this $500 million loan guarantee. They've pushed off manufacturing to 2013, which coincidentally enough is after the next election, which is never a good sign. So, time will tell, but in the meantime, I'll call them traditional automobile manufacturers are putting out electric cars or variations on that theme, improving fuel standards and mileage, which may push out this $100,000 which is a toy, quite frankly. Nobody buys a $100,000 car unless you're loaded. Or even a $60,000 or $50,000 car, which is what they're talking about manufacturing here, which still comes with the $7,500 tax credit and all sorts of other things. So we'll see. I mean, holding your breath is usually not a good idea for your health. And just some of the signs, they've had some recalls, they've had their battery manufacturers had some issues, they've had some things, and then when you push off anything beyond an election,
that's a long time to hold your breath.
Well, it's a long time to hold your breath, and there's, given the political support that Fisker's gotten, so we'll see. I mean, do I hope Delaware does well? Absolutely. Do I hope Delaware benefits from manufacturing? Absolutely. But maybe we should look at energy costs as they exist now, incentives that we can put in for small businesses, not only these sort of home run things, and that's what I've tried to encourage the governor to do, and then hopefully they're looking at that, is to not only look at the grand slams, which are nice, which get good headlines, which hold promise, but we could subsidize the accounting industry, for instance, and become a mecca for accountants. Well, we're not going to do that.
Well, that's
the analogy. And when do you stop, and who do you pick, or do you sort of? My goal is you would set an environment, and that environment provides opportunity. That environment is certainty of regulation, and preferably low regulation, or even the ability to go back and look at regulation, consistent tax policies and things like that, and then it thrives on its own instead of saying you win, we come back with your application next year.
No, and I agree with that. I agree with looking at the small businesses, but I think Delaware specifically has to redefine its industry. I mean, we should have learned that lesson with the fallout in 2008. We lost the automotive industry. We took a significant hit on the banking and financial industry, and to your analogy or comparison of the CPAs, I agree with you that we have to look at the smaller businesses, but I don't necessarily think we have to look at the standard, and excuse me for saying this, conservative perspective, which is, let's go with what's been here, with what's always existed, which has a foundation to some level. We need to look to outside things, to things that we haven't tried. That means taking a chance and taking a shot and taking a risk, then we have to do that. But imagine if we'd had a manufacturing plant that manufactured the wind turbines and that had all the industry that exists as a result of that. I think it's a step in the direction.
And I certainly understand and agree with what you're saying, but when you look at the world economy, I mean, that manufacturing goes to China. That's where they manufacture the stuff. It's a lower cost manufacturing base. It's easy to ship it over here and put it together. But if you look back at, I'm not smart enough to figure out what the next big thing is. You look back at the Financial Centers Development Act that Pete DuPont and others put in. The honest brokers will say, we thought that was going to create 150 jobs, 200 jobs, and it created something well beyond expectations because it unleashed some of that entrepreneurial drive, this thought of affinity cards that no one ever thought, who cares if you like the Dallas Cowboys, you could put it on your credit card, and those types of things. So that little thing that no one thought was going to be a grand slam turned into, a World Series win for us. And so that's sort of the thing to really say this is going to be the next home run is very difficult for anyone to do, and you have all these states competing once with each other these days. So we'll see.
So real quick before we wrap up, New Year's resolutions for the state this year.
For the state?
How about
it? Is this on? Well, I think that, geez, I'm dumbfounded.
Put him on the spot. Wow.
Talk about putting me on the spot. You know, I think in terms of what we need to do at the state is to stick to our knitting, to do the things that I've said now. We have the budgetary process will take care of itself. We're going to an election year, so that'll all be interesting. But again, I think what we should resolve to do is I'm going to lose 15 pounds and try to mitigate negative impacts of government decisions. It's a philosophical thing that Steve and I may disagree with, and respectfully disagree with each other on. To sort of say, do no harm. How's that for a New Year's resolution? First, do no harm in terms of policy making, provide an environment that allows entrepreneurs to thrive, recognize that an application economy, isn't really the way to go. Entrepreneurs shouldn't always have to go to DDO to seek money or to get money. Why not just allow those things to flourish and encourage those initiatives to flourish on their own? So first, do no harm.
For the state or the city? For the city, I got to say, I just
personally.
Personally, I don't have 15 pounds to lose.
Wow!
I didn't have a
zing right over there. That was good. Okay.
He had a very nice holiday. I didn't, he loves creme brulee. I'm going to tell you.
That's what I heard.
Yeah. So no, I think
Eclipse.
Okay,
Can I
it's
plug
in the city,
Eclipse
right?
in?
It's in the city. So
Sure.
absolutely. Yeah, for the city, I think we certainly just have to take the city in a new direction. I mean, as challenging as that is, and as formidable as an obstacle that appears to be, I genuinely believe that the next 18 months, maybe next 2 years, will be significant in where this city goes, in the direction this city heads, and in that area, in that time frame, you're seeing a regime change, if you will, and I just hope that we can empower the next administration that comes in with the right tools, and more importantly, the right thinking. And we need to get out of this old school thinking of, it's tried and true, so let's continue doing it. We've been doing it for 30 years, we'll continue. We need a new mindset. We need to change the way we're doing things because it's not working.
Greg Lavelle, Steve Martelli, thanks so much for being here.